The chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom cast a warm amber glow over the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Madison Claire Whitmore adjusted the delicate pearls at her neck, feeling their familiar weight as she surveyed the crowd of Manhattan's elite. At 24, she had learned to navigate these gatherings with practiced grace, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of expectation pressed heavier than usual. "Madison, darling, come here." Her mother's voice cut through the gentle murmur of conversation. Patricia Whitmore, resplendent in midnight blue Vera Wang, beckoned her daughter with a perfectly manicured hand. Her smile was radiant, the kind that had graced society pages for decades, but Madison caught the subtle tension in her mother's shoulders. Madison glided across the marble floor, her own champagne-colored silk dress whispering against her legs. She had chosen the understated elegance deliberately, knowing her mother's preference for making statements. As she approached, she noticed the small circle of board members gathered around Patricia, distinguished men and women whose names appeared on hospital wings and university buildings across the city. "Ah, there she is." Patricia's laugh tinkled like crystal. "Everyone, this is my daughter Madison. She's just here to help tonight." The words landed with practiced casualness, but Madison felt their sting. She had heard variations of this introduction countless times, at charity luncheons, gallery openings, and foundation events. Always the helper, never the leader. Margaret Chen, the foundation's longest-serving board member, extended a weathered but elegant hand. "How lovely to meet you properly, dear. Your mother speaks of you often." Her eyes, sharp despite her 70 years, seemed to search Madison's face with unusual intensity. "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Chen," Madison replied, her voice steady despite the familiar knot forming in her stomach. She had been working closely with Mrs. Chen for months, but always through emails and phone calls, never face-to-face at these formal events. Robert Sterling, a silver-haired investment banker, joined the conversation. "Patricia, you must be so proud. I understand Madison has been quite involved with the Foundation's youth programs." His tone was polite but dismissive, the way adults speak about children's hobbies. "Oh yes, she's been a wonderful little volunteer," Patricia beamed, placing a possessive hand on Madison's arm. "Always so eager to help with filing and organizing events. It keeps her busy." Madison felt heat rise in her cheeks, but years of training in public composure kept her expression serene. She caught Mrs. Chen watching her carefully, something almost knowing in the older woman's gaze. Around them, the gala continued its elegant dance, servers weaving between guests with champagne and canapés, the gentle clink of glasses, the soft rustle of expensive fabric. "The youth programs have shown remarkable growth this year," Madison ventured carefully, testing the waters. "The scholarship fund alone has expanded by 40%. Isn't she sweet?" Patricia's grip tightened slightly on Madison's arm, always paying attention to the details. "Though I'm sure the board handles all the important decisions." The dismissal was gentle but absolute. Madison had heard it so many times that she almost believed it herself. Almost. But the emails in her private account told a different story, the late-night strategy sessions, the budget approvals that bore her signature. The weight of the Foundation's real operations sat heavy on her shoulders, invisible to everyone in this glittering room. Dr. James Morrison, the Foundation's medical advisor, approached their group with a warm smile. "Mrs. Whitmore, always a pleasure. And you must be Madison. I've heard wonderful things about your work with the research grants." Patricia's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Research grants?" "Yes, the new initiative for pediatric cancer research. Brilliant approach to funding distribution. Very innovative thinking." Dr. Morrison's genuine enthusiasm was unmistakable. Madison felt the familiar conflict, the desperate desire to claim her work warring with a lifetime of being taught to defer, to diminish, to disappear into the background of her mother's social theater. The chandeliers seemed to grow brighter, the conversations around them more distant. "I think there might be some confusion," Patricia said smoothly, but her eyes had grown watchful. "Madison helps with small projects, but the Foundation's major initiatives are handled by the board." Oh, I don't think there's any confusion, Mrs. Chen interjected quietly, her voice carrying decades of authority. Is there, Madison? The question hung in the perfumed air like a challenge. Madison looked around the circle of faces, some curious, some confused, all waiting. Her mother's grip on her arm had become almost painful, a silent warning that had governed her behavior for years. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, the weight of truth pressed against her chest like a living thing, demanding acknowledgement. The foundation wasn't just her mother's legacy. It was her life's work, her vision, her responsibility. And these people, these brilliant, accomplished individuals, deserved to know who they were really working with. No, Madison said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. There's no confusion at all. The words seemed to echo in the sudden quiet that had fallen over their small group. Patricia's face remained perfectly composed, but Madison could see the storm building behind her eyes. The evening's careful choreography had just missed a beat, and everyone could feel it. In the distance, the string quartet began a new piece, something haunting and beautiful that seemed to underscore the tension crackling between mother and daughter. The real gala, Madison realized, was just beginning. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, vibrating with unspoken tension. Madison could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, each beat echoing the words she had just spoken. Around their small circle, the board members exchanged glances, some puzzled, others beginning to show signs of understanding. Madison, Patricia's voice carried a warning wrapped in silk. Perhaps we should. Actually, Mrs. Chen interrupted, her weathered hands folding over her evening clutch. I think it's time we all had a proper conversation. She looked directly at Madison, and in those sharp eyes, Madison saw something she had rarely encountered in these social circles. Genuine respect. Would you mind telling everyone about the Foundation's new direction, dear? The weight of the moment pressed down on Madison's shoulders. 24 years of being introduced as just here to help, of watching her mother take credit for her work, of being relegated to the shadows of her own accomplishments. It all crystallized into this single moment of choice. The Foundation, Madison began, her voice finding strength, has been transitioning over the past 18 months. We've restructured our grant process, expanded into 3 new research areas, and established partnerships with 12 additional hospitals nationwide. She paused, meeting each board member's gaze. The youth programs that Mr. Sterling mentioned? They're now our largest initiative, serving over 3,000 families annually. Robert Sterling frowned, his champagne glass pausing halfway to his lips. I was under the impression Mrs. Whitmore was spearheading these expansions. Patricia's laugh was bright and brittle. Madison does exaggerate sometimes. She's been such a help with the paperwork. Mother. The word cut through the air with quiet authority. Madison turned to face Patricia fully, and for the first time in years, she didn't lower her eyes. They deserve to know the truth. The color drained from Patricia's face, but her smile remained fixed in place. Around them, other gala guests continued their conversations, unaware of the drama unfolding in their small circle. The string quartet's melody seemed to swell, providing an incongruously elegant soundtrack to the moment everything changed. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. Madison, the research grant proposals that crossed my desk, those were your work? Yes. The word came easier now, like a dam breaking. All of them. The Pediatric Cancer Initiative, the mental health programs for underserved communities, the scholarship fund restructuring. I've been managing the Foundation's operations for the past 2 years. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly, pieces of a puzzle falling into place. The late-night emails, the detailed analyses, the budget projections that were always so thorough, that was you. It was always her, a new voice said from behind them. Madison turned to see Thomas Whitmore, her grandfather and the Foundation's original founder, approaching their group with the aid of his silver-headed cane. At 82, he still commanded attention when he entered a room, and now every eye in their circle fixed on him. Grandfather, Madison breathed, surprise and relief flooding her voice. Thomas moved to stand beside his granddaughter, his presence both protective and validating. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for some proper introductions. His voice carried the authority of decades in business and philanthropy. This is Madison Claire Whitmore, and for the past 2 years, she has been the president and chief operating officer of the Whitmore Foundation. The words hit the group like a thunderclap. Patricia's composure finally cracked, her perfect smile dissolving into shock. "Thomas, what are you?" "What I should have done months ago," he replied firmly. "Madison has been running this foundation with more skill and vision than I ever had. The board has been working with her directly, though many of you knew her only through correspondence." He looked around the circle of stunned faces. "The young woman your hostess just introduced as someone who's here to help is actually the person you've all been reporting to." Margaret Chen began to laugh, a sound of genuine delight that seemed to break the spell of tension. "My dear girl, do you know how many emails we've exchanged? How many strategy sessions we've had over the phone? And here I was, thinking you were just Patricia's shy daughter." "The budget meeting last month," Robert Sterling said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "When we discussed the hospital partnerships, that was you on the video call. MC Whitmore, not Patricia Whitmore." Madison nodded, feeling simultaneously exposed and liberated. "I used my initials for professional correspondence. I thought it would be easier." "Easier for whom?" Dr. Morrison asked gently, though his eyes flicked meaningfully toward Patricia. The question hung in the air, unanswered but understood by everyone present. Patricia stood frozen, her carefully constructed social persona crumbling around her. 4 years, she had presented herself as the foundation's driving force, basking in the prestige and recognition while her daughter did the actual work in the shadows. "I don't understand," Patricia finally whispered, her voice small and confused. "Madison, you never said. You never asked," Madison replied, not unkindly but with finality. "You introduced me as a helper, so I helped. You took credit for my work, so I worked harder. But the foundation grew beyond what either of us expected, and the board needed to work with someone who understood the actual operations." Thomas placed a gentle hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. "Madison has been protecting you, Patricia. She could have made the transition public months ago, but she didn't want to embarrass you." The full weight of the situation seemed to hit Patricia then. Her daughter, the quiet, helpful girl she had kept in the background, had been running a multi-million-dollar foundation while allowing her mother to maintain the illusion of control. The public recognition, the society page mentions, the board positions Patricia had accepted based on her supposed leadership of the foundation. All of it built on Madison's silent sacrifice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas continued, his voice carrying across their small group, "I believe it's time we made a proper announcement to the entire gala. After all, they're here to celebrate the foundation's record-breaking year, and they should know who's really responsible for that success." Madison felt her breath catch. A public announcement would change everything. Her relationship with her mother, her position in society, her entire future. There would be no going back to the comfortable shadows, no more hiding behind her mother's carefully crafted image. But as she looked around at the board members' faces, saw respect replacing confusion, understanding replacing dismissal, she realized she was ready. She had been ready for months, perhaps years. The only thing that had held her back was fear of hurting the woman who had systematically diminished her accomplishments while taking credit for her success. "Yes," Madison said, her voice steady and clear. "I think it's time." The chandeliers seemed to burn brighter, the conversations around them to grow quieter, as if the entire ballroom was holding its breath for what would come next. The second act of the evening was about to begin, and Madison Claire Whitmore was finally ready to step into the spotlight. The podium at the front of the grand ballroom gleamed under the crystal chandeliers as Thomas Whitmore made his way toward it, his cane tapping rhythmically against the marble floor. Conversations gradually died as guests noticed the foundation's patriarch moving with obvious purpose. Madison felt her palms grow damp as she watched her grandfather take his position behind the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas's voice carried easily across the opulent space, "if I could have your attention, please." The string quartet faded to silence, servers paused with their trays, and 300 of New York's most influential citizens turned their focus to the elderly man commanding the stage. Patricia stood frozen beside Madison, her face a mask of carefully controlled panic. "He's not going to," she whispered. "He is," Madison replied quietly, surprised by her own calm. After years of living in the shadows, the prospect of recognition no longer terrified her. If anything, she felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight she had been carrying for so long was finally about to be lifted. 2 years ago, Thomas continued, his voice growing stronger, the Whitmore Foundation was at a crossroads. We had served our community well for 30 years, but we needed new vision, new energy, new leadership to meet the challenges of the modern philanthropic landscape. He paused, his eyes finding Madison in the crowd. "Tonight, I want to formally introduce you to the person who has transformed our foundation into the organization we celebrate today." A murmur rippled through the audience. Madison could feel hundreds of eyes beginning to turn in her direction, though most guests were still unsure where to look. Mrs. Chen, who had positioned herself beside Madison, gave her arm an encouraging squeeze. "Breathe, dear," she whispered. "You've earned this moment." "Madison Claire Whitmore," Thomas announced. "Would you please join me?" The ballroom erupted in polite applause, though Madison could sense the confusion underlying it. She had been introduced to many of these people over the years as Patricia's daughter, the helpful volunteer, the quiet girl who organized events. Now, as she walked toward the podium, whispers followed in her wake. "Isn't that Patricia's daughter? The one who always stays in the background. What's she doing up there?" Madison's heels clicked against the marble in a steady rhythm that seemed to match her heartbeat. As she approached the podium, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirrors along the wall, tall, composed, her champagne dress catching the light as she moved. For the first time in years, she looked like she belonged in the spotlight. Thomas embraced her warmly as she reached the stage, then stepped back to give her the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, Madison Claire Whitmore, President and Chief Operating Officer of the Whitmore Foundation." The applause that followed was different now. Louder, more genuine, as board members and staff who had worked with Madison began to clap with real enthusiasm. But Madison could also see the shocked faces, the confused glances toward Patricia, who remained standing where they had left her, looking small and lost among the crowd. "Thank you," Madison said, her voice clear and steady as it carried across the ballroom. "Many of you know me as Patricia Whitmore's daughter, the girl who's just here to help. And you're right. I am here to help. I'm here to help families access mental health services they couldn't otherwise afford. I'm here to help fund research that will save children's lives. I'm here to help create educational opportunities for young people who dream of college but lack the resources to get there." She paused, allowing her words to settle over the audience. The ballroom was completely silent now, every person focused on the young woman who had stepped out of the shadows. "For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of working with an incredible board of directors and an amazing staff to expand the foundation's reach. Together, we've increased our annual giving by 60%, established new partnerships with hospitals across the country, and created programs that serve thousands of families every year." In the crowd, Madison could see faces beginning to change. Recognition replacing confusion, respect replacing dismissal. Dr. Morrison was nodding approvingly, his earlier enthusiasm now making perfect sense to those around him. "But I couldn't have done any of this work without the support of many people in this room," Madison continued. "Board members who trusted a young voice with new ideas. Staff members who worked tirelessly to implement new programs. And donors like you, who believe in the power of philanthropy to change lives." She found her mother in the crowd, still standing where she had been left, now surrounded by curious glances and whispered questions. Patricia's face was pale, her composure barely intact, but Madison felt no satisfaction in her mother's obvious distress. "I also want to acknowledge someone who has been central to the Foundation's public face for many years. My mother, Patricia Whitmore. While I've been managing operations, she has been our ambassador to the community, attending events, building relationships, and representing our values in society. That work is just as important as budget spreadsheets and grant applications. It was a gracious gesture, one that allowed Patricia to maintain some dignity while acknowledging the truth. Madison saw her mother's shoulders relax slightly, gratitude flickering across her features. The foundation's success isn't about any one person, Madison concluded. It's about all of us working together to make our community stronger. So when people ask who's responsible for the record-breaking year we're celebrating tonight, the answer is simple. We all are. The applause this time was thunderous, sustained, and genuine. Madison felt the sound wash over her like a warm wave, carrying with it years of unspoken recognition and validation. As she stepped back from the podium, Thomas took her hand and raised it high, a gesture of pride and official acknowledgement. But it was what happened next that truly mattered. As Madison made her way back through the crowd, she was stopped every few steps by guests who wanted to talk with her. Not as Patricia's daughter, but as the foundation's president. Board members introduced her to potential donors, medical professionals discussed research opportunities, and young philanthropists sought her advice on their own initiatives. "Madison," a voice called out as she paused near the champagne table. She turned to see Patricia approaching, moving slowly through the crowd. When she reached her daughter, Patricia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," Patricia said quietly, the words barely audible above the resumed conversations around them. "I never meant to." "I know," Madison replied, taking her mother's hands. "And I'm sorry too. I should have been honest with you sooner." "I was so afraid," Patricia whispered. "Afraid that if you didn't need me to be the face of the foundation, you wouldn't need me at all." Madison squeezed her mother's hands gently. "I'll always need you, Mom. Just not the way you thought." The reconciliation wasn't complete. There would be difficult conversations ahead, adjustments to be made, and new boundaries to establish. But it was a beginning, built on truth instead of the careful deceptions that had defined their relationship for so long. As the evening continued, Madison found herself in conversations she had never been allowed to have, making connections that had always been filtered through her mother's social position. The foundation's work took on new dimensions as she spoke directly with donors about their motivations and concerns. Near midnight, as the gala began to wind down, Mrs. Chen approached Madison with a knowing smile. "Well, my dear, how does it feel to finally be yourself in public?" Madison considered the question, looking around the ballroom at the faces that now saw her clearly. Not as someone's daughter or helper, but as a leader in her own right. "Terrifying," she admitted with a laugh. "But also wonderful. Like I can finally breathe." "Good," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Because tomorrow, the real work begins. The foundation needs a president who can operate in the light, not the shadows." Madison nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, not as a burden this time, but as recognition of her capabilities and worth. She had spent years proving herself in private. Now she would have the chance to lead in public. As the last guests departed and the chandeliers dimmed, Madison stood in the quiet ballroom and reflected on the evening's transformation. She was no longer the girl who was just here to help. She was the woman who was here to lead. And for the first time in her life, everyone knew it.